This is Tyne Tees Television, broadcasting to North East England and North Yorkshire from the Burnhope, Pontop Pike and associated transmitters of the Independent Broadcasting Authority.
It's July 1969 and the Nice are on tour in Ireland. They've been accompanied by Yes and the Bonzo Dog Band, with the brief tour coming to an impromptu end with a cancelled show that resulted in various band members holding an impromptu set in a local pub with Keith Emerson playing on the pub piano.
She carries a flower long after everyone said it's dead. And if you meet her, you'll never believe her head.
On the flight back from Ireland, Emerson heard strange noises from the jet engines of the plane. Noises that he quickly began to turn into melodies in his head. But not having any sheet music paper with him, he quickly grabbed the in-flight sick bag and on it sketched out the basic themes for a new suite of music that the band had been commissioned to write. By chance, the Ireland tour promoter was starting to plan his own next music venture, a music and arts event, and he'd asked the Nice to create music for it. A new epic piece themed around the event's host, the city of Newcastle upon Tyne.
Oh yeah! Oh yes! Oh yes! Oh yes! The citizens of Newcastle upon Tyne and the ancient kingdom of Northumbria are here advised that the first Newcastle Festival will commence on the 3rd day of October in the year of our Lord, 1969.
Like most English cities, Newcastle has a distinct and vibrant edge to it. Geographically remote to the centre of England, it has a strong sense of pride and independence. The city was where Nice vocalist and bass player Lee Jackson had grown up in, and over the summer, he and Keith Emerson created a fitting tribute to it. One that captures not only the beauty and energy of the city, but also the post-industrial uncertainty which at that time was beginning to cast a shadow over it. So to help score the piece, Keith had bought a copy of the book Orchestration by Walter Piston, a musical theory book which helped him understand more about the technical limitations of various instruments and how to combine them. In building a suite, Keith drew inspiration from the 5 huge bridges that span Newcastle's central river, the Tyne, and he used them as a metaphor for bridging different styles of music: classical, jazz, choral and rock. Combining rock music with orchestras was nothing new, and it was very much in vogue at the time as the evolving rock scene rapidly tried to distance itself from its poppy flower power origins and appear more serious and intellectual. It was something that the Nice had done previously on their Ars Longa Vita Brevis album, but to help widen his scope, Emerson approached American conductor Joseph Eager to help him orchestrate his new ideas on a grander scale. Working with underground band Elephant's Memory, Eager was becoming increasingly interested in the emerging rock scene and had ideas about fusing it with jazz and classical and avant-garde music. He'd also been working with the Sinfonia of London Orchestra on an album called Classical Heads, something that was designed to switch young people onto classical music. Iga gave Keith practical advice on how to use the orchestra effectively, warning Keith at one point that his original ideas for the horn section would result in its players being completely run out of breath. In August, the Nice invited Iga to the Jazz and Blues Festival at Plumpton Racecourse, and as if a 40-piece orchestra wasn't enough on the cramped stage, the band threw in a troupe of Scottish bagpipe players for good measure. By October, the Five Bridges Suite was ready, but the band could not book the orchestra to play it at the actual Newcastle Festival, and instead performed an abridged version of it as a trio only. And it was the next week in the South London town of Croydon, with orchestra and horn section, that they made the actual LP recording. The Croydon stage was so cramped that Keith's grand piano was unable to fully fit on it, and ended up being half stuck in a lift shaft. However, the sense of anticipation was high. The Nice, after all, were one of the country's leading live acts at this point, and spoken about with the same reverence as the likes of Cream and Jimi Hendrix. The behind the scenes, however, was panic, with the under-rehearsed orchestra not hiding the fact that they didn't much care for this new rock-classical hybrid. The brass section was similarly underprepared, and Emerson has later recalled his panic of finding lots of the other musicians either drunk or getting stoned as the audience began to walk into the hall to hear the Nice's Five Bridges Suite. The suite opens with a colourful romantic overture, a fantasia that sweeps and glides through a variety of styles and tempos. The brisk music vividly evokes images of a city at dawn and people setting off for work, cars, buses, deliveries, and the general hustle bustle of Newcastle life. With its old shipyards and dockside industry in decline, there was a lot of demolition and regeneration taking place in Newcastle at this time, and the music here seems to capture this changing nature. The city has 2,000 years worth of dynamic and varied architecture, and the surging strings and bold brass seem to mirror the visual contrasts that are found here. Our next change is the arrival of Emerson himself on piano. And here he seems to capture the gliding and rolling energy of the many trains that pass over the King Edward Bridge, with its rhythmic, repeating motifs evoking the motion of train wheels on tracks. The orchestra returns for another highly visual part that seems to suggest the actual people of the city, nicknamed the Geordies. The brass section is prominent here. These are instruments that are long associated with the English working class, and it seems to reflect the chatter and laughter of a warm-hearted and friendly people. On listening back to the final recording, Emerson wasn't overly impressed with how parts of his score had been interpreted, and felt that the orchestration wasn't quite what he heard in his head, stating that this opening in particular had a cartoon-like quality that he hadn't really planned. For the second bridge, we hear a foot-tapping, syncopated bass line, the rhythm of everyday life, as people walk across the river's swing bridge. This is the Nice doing what they do best, heads down, Hammond-driven groove. Before we hear him sing, it's worth noting that Lee Jackson's vocals have routinely come in for some stick over the years. However, I feel it's the disjointed, irregular aspects of his voice that provide its appeal, and here they work surprisingly well, with his coarse edge adding to the gritty picture that he paints of Newcastle at this time.
5 bridges cross the Tyne and the city sits close by. Well, some go north and some go south, but each one seems to cry. There's no good complaining about dirty air, 'cause there's nothing much else to breathe. And it's no good chatting from 9 to 5 if you haven't got the guts to live.
Emerson has said that he was surprised how critical Jackson was of his hometown, but then self-mocking is something common with English city dwellers, and Jackson captures this love-hate relationship perfectly here.
You do not want to leave, but then you make yourself believe that you've got something up your sleeve.
Partially built in a valley with the last remains of coal mines and factories still in the air, the fog on the Tyne would sometimes mix with the industrial smoke to create a smog, a thick, choking haze, and Jackson invites us to escape it with a walk to Jesmond Dean, a garden oasis in the heart of the city. It's very green. We arrive at the centrepiece of the suite, the chorale. Lush cinematic strings provide the perfect accompaniment to Lee Jackson's soft delivery, a romantic hymn to his home city. Like a tour guide, he invites us to walk with him around various parts of Newcastle city centre, namely Northumberland Street and Grey Street.
Take me to Northumberland Street, where Northumberland people test their feet on the pavement on a crowded afternoon. And no one wants to change this, but I bet they'll do quite soon.
Jackson shares his justified fears of the city changing and losing its then Victorian charm to the vandalism of 1960s town planners. However, he doesn't seem to mind the new town hall, which was indeed lit with coloured lights on its opening. He references these town hall lights as being crimson, red and blue, and he delivers a cryptic line about seeing them quite soon. And he laughs as he says this. Perhaps this is a veiled reference to the fact that Emerson would soon be departing with a member of King Crimson. Jackson was certainly aware of Emerson's desire to leave this band before it happened, and Greg Lake, whose King Crimson played a support at this concert, was known to be watching in the audience as Jackson delivered these lines.
Has your mother ever noticed? Perhaps she will quite soon.
The poem pauses and we are treated to some lovely jazz piano. Keith delivers some of his best Brubeck-inspired playing, accompanied by Brian's brush drums and Lee's melodic bass playing. We then return to St James's Park football ground where the Toon Army fans stand on a Saturday to watch Newcastle United. The bottles in their hand refer to their local brew, the one and only Newcastle Brown Ale.
Take me to St James's Park, where St James's people park their feet on a Saturday. United there they stand. Now everybody's dead there, with a bottle in his hand.
In the sleeve notes, Emerson describes his inspiration for the next bridge comes from Friedrich Gulder's Prelude and Fugue piece. Like Emerson, this pianist was known for interpreting classical pieces in a jazzy style. The high-level bridge itself supports cars and trains, and Keith describes how he uses two intertwining melodies played with his left and right hands to reflect these two modes of transport, with Brian Davison's cymbals playing the part of the crashing water below. The final section involves a recapitulation of the opening Bridge 2 theme, this time accompanied with a horn section. There's an argument that more could have been done with this finale, and although it provides a neat ending, it is slightly brief, I feel. Overall though, the suite is excellent, and it creates a genuinely cohesive blend of rock, jazz and classical, the core DNA of what was soon to become progressive rock. The whole band, and Emerson especially, were rightly proud of what they created, with only a handful of bands at the time anywhere near this level of ambition.
Great job this, Stan.
Too true, almost a labour of love.
Makes you thirsty though, doesn't it? I mean, the thought of all this beautiful Newcastle brown, that creamy head, that flavour.
Still, not to worry. Nearly lunch break. In fact, here it comes now.
There's one thing about Newcastle brown, you know. Wherever you are, it'll never let you down.
Yeah, just as well, isn't it? Oh, Sophia, like. Cheers.
Cheers.
Newcastle brown ale.
Side 2 opens with another nice orchestra pairing, this time the thumping interpretation of the intermezzo from Sibelius's Corelia Suite. A much played track from this era, the piece showcases what the Nice did best, a solid rhythmic groove that allowed them to improvise around a well-known classical theme. The orchestra members were no doubt aghast as Lee Jackson compliments them by playing a scratchy violin bow on his bass guitar. Jackson claimed that the bow idea was suggested to him by his auntie, but it's unknown where she got it from. It's Jimmy Page that's sometimes credited with popularising this technique. However, it's generally accepted that Eddie Phillips from a short-lived garage band called The Creation was the one who got there first. After more rhythmic noodling, we hear the distorted sounds of Keith Emerson assaulting his Hammond organ. Now, whilst the sight of a manic Emerson wrestling and sticking knives into an industrial-sized keyboard and all the screams that it emitted was a jaw-dropping sight at the actual concert, on record it doesn't translate that well at all, and certainly not for the almost 2 minutes of Hammond horror that we had to endure on vinyl. Thankfully, this time excludes the lengthy in-concert pause that happened when one of the organ's wires disconnected and the show itself had to be stopped whilst they plugged the keyboard back in. The next track on side 2 is another band orchestra hybrid with a swashbuckling interpretation of Tchaikovsky's Pathetique Symphony, third movement. It opens with Iga conducting the orchestra before the band join in with their customary super tight and well-disciplined playing. Brian Davison excels himself throughout and provides a superb drum solo to conclude the piece. The band had made a studio recording of this track earlier in the year, but it was left unreleased until the 1971 Elegy album. And perhaps there's an argument that it could have been included here, and maybe the whole second side of this album could have been just a purely in-studio set. The third track on side 2 is a superb version of Bob Dylan's Country Pie. Driven by Jackson's thumping bass, the interplay between all three here is excellent, and like a lot of the nicest playing, they seem to employ just the right amount of improvisation. It's like you know where they're going to, but you're never quite sure how they're going to get there.
Just like old saxophone Joe, and he's got the hot set up on the stove. Oh me, oh my, you know I love that country pie.
The actual recording comes not from Croydon, but from New York's Fillmore East, recorded earlier that year.
Blackberry, strawberry, and then lime. I don't care. Blueberry, apple, cherry, pumpernickel. I call me up for dinner, honey, I'll be there.
The track incorporates faint elements of Bach's Brandenburg Concerto, but again, it's something that had been featured on a previous album, and once more underscores the central problem with this band and their lack of original material, something that the album's final number at least addresses.
I'm one of those people that my father tells my sister not to go out with.
The album concludes with this quirky number that was originally recorded for the self-titled Nice album from earlier that year.
I'm one of those people my father tells my sister not to go out with. If I get you in a corner, you can guarantee I want more than a good night kiss.
If it wasn't creaky and creepy enough, on this track Lee Jackson's gravelly voice is fed through a ring modulator, the same voice effects unit that was used by the BBC's Radiophonic Workshop to create the Doctor Who Daleks.
I like my sister Prog. I'd rather have yours. And if I had her, you can kiss my sister. You can kiss my sister.
He sings about the same seedy character that would later lurk in the future ELP track Living Sin, which itself has origins in the Nice, as some of the Living Sin bass phrases appear on the Nice's For Example track.
I'm one of those people a certain Sunday paper likes to write about in double banner headlines. It's a fright revealing owner how they love to shout. Can't tell by now what it takes to make this bow, then you should find out. But in the meantime, while I'm looking by the Kama Sutra, boom can work the whole thing out. The whole thing out. Cause I'm one of those people that nobody told my sister not to go out, to go out, to go out with. Hey.
Side 2 of the album in many ways shows exactly why Emerson wanted to leave this band for a new challenge, namely because that challenge isn't really present on this side of the record. It's largely just a retread of familiar territory. Although the Nice played their jazzed up rocking arrangements of classical pieces incredibly well, these pieces and Bob Dylan covers dominated their sets during this period. Emerson has often said that he felt that he'd simply done everything he could with the Nice and that they had simply outlived their usefulness. Also, aside from the occasional Jackson lyric, Emerson was the only real writer in this band, and their constant touring meant the time devoted to writing was very limited. This led not only to Q's disillusionment with the Nice, but also resulted in a lack of urgency in the mixing and release of the Five Bridges recordings. Delays in the album's release continued when the record company Immediate went bust, and when the time was eventually found to produce the album, the tapes themselves couldn't be found. By the time they were eventually discovered, Keith had decided that he was to leave the band and form a new one with Crimson's Greg Lake. Sadly for Lee Jackson and Brian Davison, this was ultimately the Five Bridges' greatest legacy, in that the Croydon show it was performed at provided Greg Lake the opportunity to see Keith Emerson's masterful stage presence, technical virtuosity, and orchestral ambition firsthand. The Five Bridges album was not released until June 1970, by which time the Nice had formally dissolved, with Keith Emerson already playing in his new band with Greg Lake and Carl Palmer. Despite this, the album reached number 2 on the charts, and there's no doubt that an earlier release and a stronger side 2 could have easily sent this record to the top of the charts, and then perhaps history may have panned out a different way. If the Nice had stayed together, I could easily see them tackling most of pictures at an exhibition like ELP did. Furthermore, parts of Tarkus were in development while Emerson was with the Nice, so it's not unrealistic to see the Nice going on to create music that was similar in many respects to what ELP did. Also, the tracks on ELP's first album, like The Barbarian, The Free Fates and Knife Edge, were all classical adaptations, so the Nice would have no problems there either. However, it's difficult to see where the velvet-like softness of Lakes Take a Pebble and the gothic grandeur of The Sage would come from. It was this kind of Middle-earth mysticism, crucial to almost all rock bands over the next 5 years, that the Nice ultimately lacked. I wouldn't say that Five Bridges is a classic album, and it's arguably not even the best by this band. However, it and the Nice as a whole deserve to be more than just a footnote in the story of progressive rock. They were pioneers of onstage theatrics and had a huge following that included bands like Yes and Genesis, both of whom have cited the Nice as a major influence. In terms of laying down the foundation blocks for what would become progressive rock, the Beatles were undoubtedly the first band to step foot on a land where rock music could blend with classical and other genres. Many others like Brian Wilson, the Moody Blues and Deep Purple also travelled to that land and similarly fused rock and classical music together. But it was arguably Keith Emerson and the Nice who built a great bridge to that musical world, 5 of them in fact, so that many, many others could travel there also.
How can we hang on to a dream? How can it really be the way it seems? How can we hang on to a dream?